All right, 75 pound through 250 pound trolley system. Carries all the cars. Step one.
So whether it's the 3-inch middle or the 4-inch middle, this step is the same. Pretty much the only difference between those two is the middle and the extended cam. Everything is the same. So you're gonna take the 8-wheel plate with the hole facing towards you that's marked off, and you're going to slide this guy in nice and tight. We're gonna take this, and that's one of the things that I forgot to mention, is a quick buzz with the grinder. It's tangled the shit, of course.
Because it gets a little tweaked from the shear.
Yes, because those little tweaks on the shear, when you try and level these out, especially when you do on the next step with doing the backing plate, those will mess you up. So you have to make sure you take those little tiny corners off.
Perfect.
Then butt these guys up in here, clamp them in place, and then we're going to do a sequence weld across this like we have on our board. You can't see it right now, but it's opposing corners until we get in to the middle, and then we just flip over to the other side. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And we let that cool for just a second, and then pull this guy out with the little thing on the table, and that one's ready to go.
4 solid tacks, nice and straight.
So,
all right, step 2 is to make all the welds. Position 1, position 2, I lied, position 1, position 1. Then we're gonna flip them, and we're gonna do position 2 on all 4, flip them, position 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We're gonna end up with 8 consecutive welds, 1 inch long. All right, here's step 2, the trolley back plate and the bottom jig.
and leveling them out. So you're gonna slide the backing plate in.
Always keeping that on that side, right?
Yeah, so it has a little mark over here, so you know which side it's going to. Then we get it clamped.
It's very critical that the cam side is on the left as you're looking at the trolley here.
Okay. It never goes on the other side. So these are, and this is always on the right if you're looking at it like this, but in the other jig it's on the left.
Let's see. All right, brake hole on the right and cam on the left.
So now we put this jig in between my 2 little marks I have on the table, because I know that's where if I level this out, it should be over towards that line. So now I'm gonna push the clamp down to get the bubble to my line, because that's where I want to tack it at. And then I'm gonna check up top. Okay, it looks good.
So you're touching the left line.
Touching the left line is how the table is right here in between these.
Okay.
So if I match that, I know I'm level.
All right.
And then this guy's hot. So
move it and let go of it.
see how much that just moved down?
All right.
So now if I scooch this down,
The bubble moves right over to where it's even on the front and the rear. And now we're matching the table. Now the 2 parts are on the same plane and we can tack them in place. trolley. Step 3, opposing wheel axles.
All right, when starting and getting ready to use the jig for the pins, the black end is the old depth. We don't use that anymore. Use this end. You dip these in nozzle dip occasionally, and then kind of spread it around in the holes that you're going to use so they don't stick in the block. And then slide these guys into the spot where we're going to weld them. And then I use this wood block as kind of a spot to help hold up the back end of the trolley. Then you just drop these guys in here, and then we're going to circle weld around the pin and then push into the center at the very last second. So they get welded in there good. You hold down pressure over the top, make sure they're flat. You're not kicking this over the side to side so they don't come out crooked. You're gonna hold flat down. Just like that. Then take our other two, drop them in. Same thing, hold down. You can hold the nozzle with your hand like this.
Step 4, load bearing axle wheels.
So when you get ready to start, you want to take the chisel along the edge, clean off any slab, make sure that you're clear, like there's one right there. So I want to take that out of the way so the jig will line up flat up against here. Then you get your riser underneath this, make sure it is even with the trolley plate. And then you take the large axle on top, and this gets pushed over to the left. And then you take this guy to help hold this in place flat, lay that over the top, and then we hold this in place with our hand, like that, and get our first 4 tacks and hold until they cool. We stay away from the edge, don't go over the edge. Then once they're cool, you can pull this jig off and do the other 4 tacks. Spin it towards with the other end, slide this up, make sure it's nice and tight, get our other 2 axles in here, and they get pushed towards the outside to make sure that they are out enough. And then you set this guy back on top over the center, hold that firmly and tack it, and don't lift up until the welds are cool.
Staying away from the outside edge.
Same thing up here. Now that these are all tacked in position, you're going to weld the 4 welds down here, because this is going to need a second to cool before you weld these up here. So weld the riser on both sides, then the axle on both sides, then we're going to weld the top across and then push the weld down towards the bottom on the front here. And then we'll flip this around and we'll weld the other weld on these before we do the other 4 on this. That's the push down in front of the axles. so they get welded on that end. Then we're gonna do the bottom weld on the top too. And now the last 4 on the bottom. Now we take the trolley, scrape any of the slag that's on the table on our way off the table, slide our cam jig up around the bottom of the trolley, make sure it fits tight. Then we're going to clamp the trolley plate down, put the cam in place, make sure it's tight in place. We're going to clamp the cam, and then we're going to make sure that this is nice and even. Sometimes you'll have a spot where this is kicked a little bit, so hold the cam and the jig and gently tap to where this is straight. Then you do 2 small welds on the top end of the cam. Let that cool for just a second. Separate the clamps, lift the trolley up, pull the jig off, and do 2 small welds directly underneath. Now we take our weld nuts, get these guys in place. You're gonna have to, sometimes you're gonna have to tap them in. Hold this over the top with pressure so they don't want to lift up and get cocked sideways, and then get a tack on the very end of each one. Extended trolley cam with 1-inch angle to lift it, and then here's our little jig. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take the little jig, line it up in here. I have 1 pair that fits right here nice that I've marked cam. We always sweep the table clean to make sure we got a good surface.
6-inch commercial trolley.
And we're gonna clamp above the cam notch so we don't get in our way. Then we're going to slide this guy up into the corner, and then this one you hold in position. I like to keep my finger tight right here up against the side and push in, and then my thumb is pushing on the corner, and I just hold this guy here, and we get our 2 quick little welds. And that top one's really hard because you can barely reach with the way that the angle is. After it cools, pull your clamps, tip your trolley up, and finish your 2 welds on the other side. And that is your extended cam.
Excellent. 6-inch. Adding the base plate, setting up the jig.
On the table, there are marks, and then there's this angle that has marks as well for lining things up. This angle goes in between these 2 marks. This bottom mark is where you would slide the bottom up to. Then this that you use to hold the trolley butts up, and there's a mark that goes on the very edge of this angle. Then you clamp these in place. This would indicate where this plate goes, the jig. That's for a 12-inch bottom mark. This is for an 18-inch bottom mark. Now that we have this clamped in place, we can take the trolley, set this up, make the edge of the trolley flush with the bottom of the plate over here, and then after we clamp this, we're going to tack it, then fully weld it. I clamp this above the cam up against the center as close as I can, so it holds this in the middle and flat. And now we will tack and weld it.
Complete clean job. Then trolleys get set down complete, ready for paint. Step 6 is installing the load-bearing high-speed bearings and opposing wheels and brake system.
Okay, so first thing you want to do is set this up on the axles. Make sure, again, even after paint, that we don't have any barriers in the way, because those will stop you from putting the wheels on. Then we slide on the washers, flat side down. Then we're going to take our bearings, set them over the top, and gently take with the hammer and tap them down. Make sure they're both seated. Then we're going to walk over to the press and slide this underneath. And our first swedge mark is going to be up top, and then we'll do a little bit deeper one close to the trolley. You don't want to put too much pressure to bend the axle away, so the better mark is going to be close to the plate. Same with this one, only this one here, the axle's solid, so you're not at risk of bending the trolley plate as you are on this one.
I got you.
This one has to be done very carefully. So it's a light mark here, then the heavier mark here.
Heavy mark by the big weld.
Loosen, move. Oh. Sometimes it'll move on you. Also, if you go too much, you can split the raceway.
Right, do not do that.
So, yeah, don't do that because it really sucks to get that off. So we'd switch over to the back axle. Same thing. Outside first, then inside, and that's all the further that we need to do. No huge marks.
Trolley brake installation.
So we're going to take the quick link and our brake arm with the spring on the left and the bend facing up, and we're going to run the quick link through the hole. Bring the brake arm through, and then run the quick link nut down. Then the next step is going to be our grade 8 through our brake with the teeth on the right. Then round side up towards the brake, round side down towards the trolley, 2 washers. Then we're going to go the short 1/4-20 through the brake and set this down. Now the nylock for the 1/2 inch goes on the back. And then the nylock for the brake goes on top. Then we're going to do our long 1/4-20 through the trolley with the spring over the top, but my fingers don't want to grab it. And then 1/4-20 on top. And then the first thing you want to do before you tighten the 1/2 inch is tighten both 1/4-20s, because you can only get the wrench underneath this when it is loose. So we want the threads poking just through the nylock on this, so the brake still has some play, and then just through the nylock on this, so it's not squeezing on the spring too much. So that's how we want those. And the next one we're going to do is tighten up the brake. And you'll want to run this in just enough to where the brake has some play. and then make sure that your brake works good. It's catching on the quick link down there because I don't have any pressure on it. Brake works okay, so we're good to go. All right, so sometimes you'll get these to where the bearings aren't all the way set in the wheel, but also for swedging these on properly, you want to make sure you go recess side up, and then you can take this little tool and gently tap down the raceway to make sure that it's fully seated. That way when you swedge this on, it's not moving anywhere.
Perfect. All right, opposing polyurethane wheels.
Okay, so we're gonna use 2 washers per each one of these axle pins to make sure that the wheel is up enough to not touch. We used to use 1, that was not enough in some cases. 2 we still have space for and keeps us clear. You're gonna have to do the same thing here, and if there's any berries on the axle, you have to knock them off so the washers will go on. So we're doing 2 washers per a pen.
And you make sure every wheel spins. You might have to have 3 if you got a bad machined wheel.
2 does it.
Okay.
1 was the problem. So we've got clearance for it, so we're good with that. So 2 on every one of those. You want to make sure that you have one of the 60 grit Tiger pads as close to new as you possibly can, so you can grind these flat, so you have a flat surface to be able to swedge these on with. I have 2 blocks, one for 6-inch trolleys, one for 5-inch trolleys, to be able to go underneath this to help support this so you don't have a big bounce when you're
Perfect.
trying to swedge these on here. So now that we have the washers on and we're ready to go with the grinder, there is always a spot, and I'll show you, can feel that with one of these wheels. There's a side that is flat and there's a side that is recessed. We want the flat side down on every one of these, because if we have the recessed side down, it's going to be touching the trolley face. So recessed side up. So we're gonna take this guy and we're gonna set, I always start up top, so I don't need to take off much. So I'm gonna just take off. Just grind a little bit. Grind a little bit. I could go a little bit more, but that's honestly fine. So you want at least about a 64th to a 16th poking up.
Let's go ahead and ping that one.
Oh, okay. So you're going to want to hold your hand on top of the wheel and use your hand to help hold the punch steady, because it's going to want to jump into the raceway and it can mess up the raceway. So 1 good swing on each area, and you do 1, 2, 3, 4. So we get 4 swedge marks on this, so the bearing does not. So that's 1 good one. 2. And 4. Raceway doesn't spin. Wheel spins, it should spin a little bit more free than that, but it's not bound up, so that's okay.